Jump out. Play has its limits. Hey everybody, and welcome to the second episode of the Level Up Times podcast. I'm Adrian, your host. And what a week it's been. Insane. Brutal, one might say. Welcome to the show, everybody. This is episode number 2 of the Level Up Times podcast. I'm your host, Adrian. Today we are going to be getting into all of the crazy stuff that's been coming out of Xbox and PlayStation, for that matter, around the digital sort of future that we find ourselves living in. And Xbox has just been hitting that reset button to the point where it's probably coming off, breaking down. It's just been a brutal week for the industry, and it just feels like we're getting less into, isolated bits of bad news and layoffs, and then the financial year hit, and it's just been... It feels like this is a new normal. We'll get into the news in a bit here around what Xbox CEO Asha Sharma has been doing over there at Microsoft, swinging the axe. But before we get into that, let's get into a bit of lighter stuff in terms of what I've been playing and that one more turn factor. And for me this week, it's been a little bit of catching up with Star Fox. Off the release last week of Star Fox 2, and then also, Rhythm Heaven Groove came out. Star Fox came out 2 weeks ago, and Rhythm Heaven Groove came out last week. And those are 2 games I've been spending. So it's been a Switch kind of week here. We've run a bit of content on both of those games. Well, let's get it started with Rhythm Heaven Groove. This is a rhythm game, if the name doesn't give it away, from Nintendo. I think it's a co-development. Let me get the box here. I think it's a co-development from TNX. So, this is a rhythm game. Came out pretty recently. It's technically a Switch 1 game. I've been playing it on the Switch 2. We did a bit of a blind date episode on the site. You can go check it out if you haven't already. Go check it out. It's on our YouTube as well. This is a pretty simple, easy to play rhythm game. I've been looking at it from the lens of someone that plays music, it's easy to play, easy to get into. Literally 1 to 2 buttons a mini game. It plays a lot like a WarioWare game in that regard. And I'm about on the 3rd phase. So the way they structure the game is they give you 4 games and a sort of a capstone they're calling a remix. You play the 4 games, you get medals on them based on how you do, and then when you've played all 4 of them, you unlock the remix, which is almost like it's where the game kind of shines. It plays through those 4 mini games. It jumps between them to a track, to a song, and you try and get all the patterns down by playing the 4 games, and then you sort of jump into this more complicated version where it's switching you between game A and game B and game C and game D, and trying to keep in your mind the beat, the rhythm, and also remember kind of the specificity of the rules and timings of some of these games has been really interesting. I checked out the demo the week before it came out to sort of get a feel for it. It's my first Rhythm Heaven game. I've actually never really interacted with the franchise. I've heard a lot about it, and I thought this is probably a good entry point, and it is. Still haven't got into the multiplayer. I'm keen to play that with some friends because I just feel like this is a really good kind of... I mean, it's what Nintendo does best with the Switch, right? It's, pull it out, put it on a table, let everyone have a Joy-Con and have a go. So I'm really keen to play into the multiplayer. Maybe we'll talk about that in next week's episode. But, there's plenty to love here. It's a really simple, well-executed game. One of the things, there's a couple of downsides here. One of them is the art style. The art style's pretty, it's simple, but I feel like some of them just look like someone went on, I don't know, Adobe Flash back in the day, or and came up with some of this art. It's okay. It gets the job done. This is a budget title. I should probably add. This is selling for, let's have a look here. In Australia, this is retailing for $49, $59, depending on on whether you got any release day deals. I actually cannot see it, interestingly, on any of the major retailers, which makes me wonder whether it's actually sold out. That is so strange. Yeah, I literally cannot open it on any of the retailers. Big W's got it for $49. Nintendo is selling it on the eShop for $49, so I'm going to assume that's the going price. Look, I mean, the music, which you would expect from a rhythm game to be where a lot of the effort goes into, honestly, it's entirely forgettable. The Capstone have what I'm assuming are more produced tracks. It gives you a little bit of a song name and an artist when you get to those remix stages. Some of them are weirdly simple, like literally, I don't know, 45 seconds to a minute and a half, and you're done. Others are more complicated, but the sort of pacing is a bit weird in that regard. I think I mentioned this last week. One of the things that I was really, really keen on looking at was, are the songs going to, or are the games going to get a bit more complicated as you go? I was really hoping for things like, I think I talked about, the frisbee catching game where you've got to wait 7 beats, press jump, and you're a little dog catching a frisbee thrown at you. I was really hoping they would start to do things like polyrhythms and maybe having you count 7 beats midway through another count and, things like that. I haven't run into too much of that. It has been very simple kind of pattern recognition games. One of the more interesting ones that I played was one where you play as you're a set of 3 cars. You're the car in the middle. If a car in front of you does an action, you know that you've got to brake within, I think it's, you get 2 honks and you brake immediately. And then the car behind you will signal an acceleration, which is 3 honks or 3 beeps, and you got to wait a bit and then go for it. With another button. So it's a 2-button game, one for accelerate, one for brake. That one was fun. And there's a little bit of this here and there, but other than that, it's really just a case of, hey, let's get through these games, and try and get some medals and try and get some, just try and complete the set, if you will, which is pretty fun. But I'm hoping there's a bit more to it as we go along. I'm not sure how many. The box is saying there's over 80 new rhythm games to play. So if I take that literally, there's 4 new games every set. That means there's 20 sets. I don't know. It seems like a lot, but maybe. We'll keep playing and give you the update as we go. One of the things I have noticed about it, and I think we looked at it in the Blind Dates episode, was the calibration feels off. And I've noticed this playing it out of the capture kit, like straight plugged into a TV. The way the game asks you to calibrate when you're plugged into a screen is very, very simple. You don't get any ability to, mess with the millisecond latency or anything like that. You literally stare at a screen, and every 4th beat you press a button, and then you do that, 10, 20 times, and it'll calculate, what your latency is going to look like, but you don't get a chance to actually see it in action. And the outcome of this is some of the games, I've got a pretty good sense of time. I play music. I play the bass, which is quite a rhythm heavy instrument, predominantly. And I feel like I've got a pretty good sense of rhythm and time, but some of these games, no worries at all. Very, very simple. Some of the games have brutally tight timing windows where even though even playing it back, I was watching some of the footage, it sounds like I'm hitting it at the right moment, within a couple of milliseconds, and the game is failing me. Whereas on other games, the window is wide open. So I don't know if it's a artificial kind of difficulty that they're throwing in, or if some of the games are just maybe not balanced 100%. I've also noticed it playing it out of the dock. So the game does say, hey, we're not going to be able to 100% reduce false hits unless you play it in handheld mode. And so I've tried that. I still noticed it was a bit off. So I suspect that it is a gameplay sort of thing, and maybe I'm being too complimentary of my own timing, but it really does feel a little bit off from time to time. That's not to say that game is not incredibly fun, and for the price, you could do a lot worse. So there's 80 games according to the box in solo mode, and then there's another 30 games for up to 4 players And they're simple games, but they're fun. Yeah, I'm just hoping maybe as we go further down, and I'll keep you guys updated, that we get a little bit more challenge to it. So that's been one part of my Switch week, and then the other part has been going back in time, going and experiencing the fun and the thrill that was the Nintendo 64 version of Star Fox 64. I'm working on a bit of we did some live streaming early in the week. I'm putting together a bit of a video that we'll have on the site maybe later this week, early next week, where I want to compare and contrast the 64 version and the Switch 2 remake. The game, I'm playing it on the Switch 2 just because it's easier. I've got the Nintendo Switch Online, 64 emulation, so we've been playing it on there. I suspect they have done a lot of work they've taken off the frame rate caps because it's running really smooth. From memory, it did not run that smooth. But one thing that's been really popping out to me has been the control scheme on the 64 version is, I'm going to cop some flack for this for sure. It's just been way better than the Switch 2 version. I think that the maneuvers have always been a bit weird. So the way that the 64 emulator works on the Switch is it basically says, hey, use the right stick as your C buttons, which is weird because you've got up, down, left, right on the D-pad. But and so to do somersaults and stuff, you actually have to pull both the the main stick, the left stick, and the right stick to pull off those maneuvers that would typically be on the C buttons. 64 didn't particularly have a great controller even back in the day, and so the mapping is actually I'm pretty happy with it. The Switch 2 version, it looks amazing, don't get me wrong, and the way that they managed to translate the cinematic quality of that game. I mean, you go back to 64 version, it's got dialogue, it has a whole sort of Star Wars-y kind of intro that's narrated, and then you get into the gameplay, and there's, Slippy the Toad is talking to you, and, all of that's happening. So they've managed to translate that pretty well. And I really love the characterization that they've kept for the characters in the Switch 2 version. The control scheme, though, and the way that the ship moves, the R-Wing moves around, is so slow, and it just doesn't feel right to me. And I think I mentioned that when we were playing the Switch 2 version on the site on a live stream a few weeks ago. I was like, something doesn't feel right, but I couldn't tell. Is this the emulation? Is this the game feel of this particular game? Or, sorry, is this the game feel of this particular game? Am I remembering the 64 version incorrectly? And no, the 64 version, in my opinion, does just feel, you get that sense of speed, that sense of scale way better. And the fact that even the first person stuff, which on the Switch 2 you can actually go to mouse mode if you're holding the Joy-Con and you put it down on a table or on your lap, you go into that first person mode. That first person mode is in 64, and I still don't feel like it's got a lot of purpose. You lose a lot of peripheral vision when you're in it, but it's still amazing that we had that back then. And I think that to me is the core of why I've wanted to go back, is really, we can talk a lot of crap about what games used to be and how our memory of games was, particularly if you've got that nostalgia. I played a bunch of N64 as a kid. It was one of my first consoles. I started on the Genesis or the Mega Drive and I went from there to, I think it was N64, then PS1, and then the rest is history. But I still look at that game with a sense of, wow, you've pulled this off on this hardware. Which is good. I was hoping to come back with a positive outlook and not just like holy crap, this game was shit. But that's not the case. So the branching path stuff I've never been a big fan of, even back then. So I'm keen to spend some more time with the Switch 2 version and sort of finish a run, if you will. Switch 2 does a lot of quality of life stuff as well. Like the tutorial is way better. I think I was sitting there for like 5 minutes at the end when you're in that open world section at the end of the open area arena. In the tutorial on the 64, I was like, what do you want me to get out? Do you want me to keep going? Like, when are we going to move this thing forward? And then you wait for like 50 tutorial messages, and it's like, oh yeah, you can quit whenever you're ready. Just press the quit button. I'm like, oh, wasted 10 minutes of my time figuring out what was going on. So the Switch 2 version obviously does a way better job, and it's got things like objectives, mid-level that sort of keep you engaged, and does a bit more of that modern gamification kind of thing. But it works, and the core game is it is what it is. I mean, it feels the same. You know, you've got bombs, you've got laser upgrades, all of that stuff is not being changed, which is really cool, and the levels just look amazing. Especially when you think about how do you translate a game that's triangles and polygons in the weirdest of configuration and turn it into something really beautiful in 3D and in a modern context, right? So that's been really good. Keen to play more of the Switch 2 version. I'll cut together something and then we'll pop it up on the website and on the YouTube. But that's been my week in gaming. Other than that, it's just been a lot of covering the shit that has been coming out of this industry over the past week, and we're about to get into it here. So let's kick it off with Xbox's big reset. 3,200 jobs within Xbox will be cut over the next financial year. Half of those were ripping the Band-Aid yesterday, the day before, with a memo that Asha Sharma put out on the Xbox Wire blog, which I'll get into in a sec. The studios that we have been covering for a while now, I think there were 4 core ones we were looking at. There was Compulsion Games, there was Double Fine, there was Ninja Theory, and there was Undead Labs. Those were the 4 studios that we kind of knew something was going on. We were just waiting, and then there was talk about, wait for the financial year. That's when Xbox and Microsoft will do the big cuts. And sure enough, we didn't have to wait long, 1 week in, and at least we have a bit more clarity now. So they've split it up. There's a 5th studio as well, which we'll get into. There was some, with Arcane Studios, there was a lot of talk about that maybe in the last few days. This was sort of late news that was coming out of the rumour mill. But 2 of the main studios that we were looking at, Compulsion Games and Double Fine, they are going to go back to what they're calling go back to management, in other words, going independent. Microsoft is basically throwing them a bone. Here's some money. They're giving them some runway. And here's all your old IP, so you can still monetize that, I'm assuming. I suspect they will get the rights to, sell their games and reap the benefits of those IP. And so, Compulsion Game and Double Fine going back independent. I read this a few ways. One is, A, what value to Xbox in the current strategy that Asha Sharma is talking about do they get for keeping those IP and holding those studios back? And B, what does it look like in this context? You know that you're under the spotlight as a company. You know that you're not going to get some good press either way. There is no benefit to actually formally closing down the studios, particularly when if you're closing them down, you're going to have to pay severance out. You're going to pay, I don't know how many people are at these studios. We can probably do a bit of maths here, but, let's assume each studio has 50 to 100 employees. If you're firing 50 to 100 employees times 2, you've got to pay them all out. You've got to do your severance. You've got to do all that stuff. And you will be the studio that basically killed Double Fine, which has been around since, let's find out, Double Fine's been around since 2000, right? So 26-year history studio. Psychonauts, Brutal Legend, some of the biggest names. I was going to say Grim Fandango, but that's technically a LucasArt. But, all of these historical, fairly big names, at least within the gaming canon. Do you want to be the company on top of everything to say, yeah, we're shutting you down? Or would you rather say, hey, take the stuff, here's some money, figure it out. Hopefully you'll do well. Otherwise, it's on you. And so there's an angle to that is, well, that's nice. They're keeping the studios going. They're giving them some money. That's great. And then there's the other angle, which is the more skeptical angle, which is, well, actually, Xbox just didn't want to take the hit on that from a PR perspective. Either way, good to see that those studios are still alive. I just had a look now. 105 employees at Double Fine. So, according to Wikipedia. So, yeah, I mean, it makes sense to sort of let those studios go quietly, for lack of a better term, and, at least give them a chance in the market. That being said, it's a very difficult market to be in, and not a lot of money out there to fund projects and get deals, which leads me to Ninja Theory and Undead Labs. So those are the other 2 studios we were looking at. Ninja Theory were working on Senua, Undead Labs were working on State of Decay 3. Both of those games were shown at the Xbox Showcase. We knew that they were looking at being closed, possibly sold. A lot of questions were being asked. We now know that the studios are being sold off. So the wording is interesting. It implies that maybe they haven't signed, the ink hasn't dried on the deals, and they're sort of waiting. But the way that it's been worded is this is from the Xbox Wire. Ninja Theory and Undead Labs have entered terms to join new ownership with funding to complete and grow Senua and State of Decay 3. So as it stands, those games will continue. And so we'll see. Obviously, when you are purchased, when any company is purchased, typically there's cuts. I would be very surprised if that wasn't the case in the coming weeks and months as those studios enter their new management. But overall, 4 for 4, studios will continue. The fifth studio, which is Arcane, they are not based in the States, and they're based in France. I believe Arcane is in Lyon. Yep, they're in Lyon. And they obviously, again, another studio with a huge pedigree to it. Not only the Dishonored series, they worked on games since like the 90s, if from memory, late 90s. So they did Deathloop. Deathloop did okay. And they were working on Marvel's Blade, which is not a lot of information has come out aside from the fact that they were working on it. Obviously Bethesda. So Arcane sits under the Bethesda banner. The state of that studio is currently, because they're in France, the reporting that has come out of a couple of places, including Stephen Totillo's GameFile newsletter, was the reason we didn't hear much about it was they were going through the legal process, and it takes a very long time in France. They have very, very strong worker protection laws, industrial relation laws, whatever you want to call it. And so therefore they are in consultation with the French Works Council to review, quote, potential strategic options. So we're still waiting to see what comes out of that. That may take some months. This is not something that Microsoft can really expedite, particularly if they want to look good. And I mean, this was stuff that came out of, if you remember, back when they were buying Activision. What does this mean for the worker rights? What does this mean for worker protection? So that's the 5 main studios that were on the sort of spotlight for closures. This cut is broader than that. So as part of the cuts, they are also looking at their core sort of businesses. They're looking at Activision, they're looking at ZeniMax, which includes Bethesda, they're looking at Blizzard, they're looking at King, so you got your ABK, Activision, Blizzard, King, they're all under the spotlight, Mojang and Xbox Game Studios as a whole. The changes are as such. Mojang and King will be reporting directly to Asha Sharma, which makes sense. I mean, those are less portfolio studios and more your casual side. Particularly with Mojang, your kids segment is quite big there, and so therefore that's a kind of a different business. The other studios like Activision, Bethesda are going through some bit of a changes, and this is pretty fresh news that we're getting, and we reported on this today on the website leveluptimes.com. The studios that are really getting hammered at the moment, and this list may grow over the coming days. We'll keep reporting on it. Obsidian Entertainment is losing about 70 staff. They obviously, another studio with huge pedigree, Neverwinter Nights, Knights of the Old Republic, Fallout New Vegas. 70 jobs are being cut there. The work that was being done for Grounded 2, which is in early access or in game preview, I think they call it on the Xbox Store, that will continue. The Outer Worlds 2 DLC that they committed to will continue, so nothing changes in those with regards to those projects. No talk about what's happening beyond that. The studio's about 23 years old. Obviously, a lot of history there. Chris Avellone, who was one of the co-founders. Also, huge background and pedigree there. That's Obsidian Entertainment. That was reported by Kotaku. Then we have id Software, and this is where it gets a little bit questionable. Literally yesterday, id Software released the DLC for Doom of the Dark Ages, called Revelations. Today, they are losing about 90 staff, according to industry news outlet Game Developer. So this is the studio. I mean, you talk about pedigree, Doom, Quake, some of the grandfathers of the modern, or the first-person shooter as we know it today, are getting absolutely gutted. They also have QuakeCon in August, and I saw some reporting, this may be more anecdotal, about no one knows what's happening with QuakeCon, which is a bit concerning a month out from that event. And there's a lot of talk about the majority of those cuts happening there. About, as I said, about 90 staff being reported were in the code and sort of programming disciplines. So the question there becomes, okay, does that mean that you're kind of relegating id Software to Satellite Studio? And without any engineers, are you actually planning on keeping the id Tech engine, series of technology? Is that going to continue? What does that mean for Doom? Doom is quite a popular game. I mean, say what you will about the Dark Ages. I know there's a lot of conflicting thoughts. It plays like a really good Doom, but it plays really slow because it's more of a medieval kind of a take on it. I have not checked out the DLC. I'm curious to spend some time. Probably not urgent, given the state of the release week, which we'll get into later. But Dark Ages, I enjoyed it. I did not stick with it as much as I stuck with, obviously Doom and Doom Eternal. So I wonder how it did in market. I wonder how that positions, Game Pass with all these big studios going, which we'll get into as well. There's a lot of talk about what's going on over at the Game Pass division of Xbox. And then we've got Bethesda as a broader umbrella. So we know that underneath it we've got Machine Games working on Wolfenstein 3. They're also working, I'm assuming, supporting the Amazon Prime Wolfenstein show, which is being produced. And we know that there's an Elder Scrolls 6 somewhere in the caverns of Todd Howard's brain. We know that there is an Elder Scrolls 6 and possibly some Fallout stuff. Who knows? The reporting that's coming out of IGN is that there's an internal email from Jill Brash, who's sort of the head of Bethesda, saying that they're looking at shifting from a sort of a studio strategy where they say, okay, Bethesda, what are you working on? Okay, id, what are you working on? Okay, Machine Games, what are you working on? To taking the concept of the franchise as being that sort of tentpole, and then they say, okay, where are the resources? Where are the gaps? What do you guys need on Wolfenstein? What do you guys need on Doom? What do you guys need on Elder Scrolls? And shifting the resources from that sort of centralized pool. So that means that the studios almost become these, assuming we take that at face value, and these things may change. Obviously, it's everything's moving right now. You sort of assume that we're going to a position of almost satellite studios that feed into a franchise. And so you may have a Machine Games that is, this is complete guesswork. You may have a Machine Games that, majority of people over here working on this Wolfenstein, and then maybe we don't need these artists, and so they go off and work on Elder Scrolls, or they go off and work on Doom. Possibly. All we know is that it's this long memo that's come out of IGN, and basically says, to best position Bethesda, we are shifting from a planned model primarily centered on what's next for each independent studio to one that focuses on our strongest franchises and determining the content roadmap that best serves our players and Bethesda as a whole. From there, we'll align the right talent, technology, and resources to deliver on these. So again, it sort of sounds like they're going to this pooled model. We'll share more news, more about a direction in the weeks and months ahead. But for today, my focus is on the people, yada, yada, yada. And the classic corporate, hey, we're really confident about our lineup and we'll do great. So we'll see what happens. But Bethesda is also heavily impacted. This all feeds into a broader Microsoft cut, and I think that's a story that's probably getting lost a little bit. The 3,200 jobs that is being named, the 1,600 that were cut a couple of days ago, and the 1,600 that will be cut over the course of the financial year, is only some of the cuts that are happening in Microsoft as a whole company. So we're talking Satya Nadella, reporting line down. The talk from Microsoft is that they are globally aiming to cut about 2% of the workforce. That becomes equivalent to about 4,800 jobs. And in Australia, obviously we're an Aussie outlet. ABC News over here in Australia is reporting that that there are Australian roles that will be affected by these cuts. So really, really grim news. I suspect this is not the last of it. I suspect we will hear more. I did see some articles that basically listed out all the studios. There were some studios that came out, particularly Double Fine, etc., that were being reported on in terms of like social media posts that they had put out, which you would expect, right? So they're all saying, "Hey, we're either we're sold off, we're leaving the Xbox brand. We thank Xbox for all their time," and sort of that kind of glad-handly kind of commentary, which you would expect. You want to leave on good terms. You presumably also want to release on Xbox Helix or whatever the next console is at some point. And some of these games may even release on the Series X and S. So, your typical kind of farewell note for a company that is going independent or getting bought out. But it's devastating cuts across the board, and our thoughts go out to everyone impacted, and hope everyone lands on their feet. It's a really tough business, as you can imagine, right now. So that's what Xbox is doing. What is Sony doing? And literally, I was joking on Blue Sky because the moment we released episode 1 of the podcast, which, we were talking a lot about all these digital changes. We had Grand Theft Auto 6 going disc only, and, what does this mean for our future of A, what does it mean for physical media, but B, what does it mean for the industry at large? I literally pressed publish, and I, crap you not, an hour later comes the news that the PS6, sorry, I shouldn't say PS6, that Sony is pulling the plug on physical disc production. So we know that, generally speaking, we know that people are buying physical media less. And I think partly it's easier to just press a button and download a game. But I think if we look at what the game's physical prints signify today, they are literally downloads. Like, you put the disc in and half the time you're downloading another 50, 60, whatever gigs to actually play your game because of day one patches, because of, the industry has moved away from this concept of, hey, here's a gold master, pop it out on a disc and pop it in and you get the game. So Sony is saying, yep, no one's buying these discs. And so we are going to, from January 2028, we are going to stop printing discs. This is a quote from Sid Schumann, who's the Senior Director at SIE Content Communications, Sony Interactive Entertainment. This is a natural direction for Sony Interactive Entertainment to adapt to consumer trends as the general preference for digital media significantly outpaces physical discs. So, yeah, basically no one is buying discs. I personally love to... I grew up in the physical world, right? Like, I grew up buying video games and having them on my shelf, and certainly, on the PC, that's a different story. We don't even have physical discs half the time. And when you do, you get a disc with a code, or you get an empty jewel case with a code in it. So it's certainly not a new experience to go through that transition if you're a PC gamer. But I think there's something deeper that the physical copy represents. Obviously, you own it and you can sell it and you can trade it and you can do whatever you want with the disc. That's one thing. But there's something more sacred. I think there's something more around, what have you got on your shelf? And, you got friends that come over that are gamers and they're like, oh, do you own this? How's this game? Hey, why don't you try it? Go, lend it out to them. And just having a physical remnant, however archaic it may now be in the current generation, is something that's, nice to have. So it's disappointing. There's been a lot of backlash on the internet, as you can expect. Sony's been trying a bunch of stuff in the digital space. They were doing things like A/B testing of dynamic prices, so that user A may see a game for $50, user B may see a game for $60, which I think is insane. Some algorithmic pricing, and because the game is it's coming from one place. They're not printing. There's no scarcity to it. It's a digital store. You can download that as much as you'd like. and sell as many copies as you like, you end up in a position where Sony effectively controls that flow. And when you have that, you've effectively got a pricing dominance for a particular SKU. That's where I'm a bit concerned. Now, Sony is saying, and this is a quote from them, "We will continue to prioritize our resources to drive innovation in how players can access games and provide choices as to where players prefer to purchase new games, whether that's at retailers or PlayStation Store." But again, what does that mean? Like, if I'm buying a key fob or, even a digital copy of a game at my EB Games or at my JB Hi-Fi or GameStop in the States, who is controlling that flow? And what does that mean for things like sales? What does that mean? Does that mean that Sony is saying, hey, this game's on sale, and therefore all the retailers are selling at the same price? And what does that mean for price competitiveness in the retail space? A lot of questions. I was also having a look. It looks like there will be some concessions made for games that perhaps are selling in disc. Maybe let's assume, Christmas 2027 game goes out. It's on disc, and what does that mean? I've run out of discs. I've sold through my units, and now I need more. There will be a way for publishers to order more copies of discs. So it's not necessarily that the discs will stop being printed. It's that new games will be unable to, have a printing from January 2028. There was some talk, and I don't have the source here, but I was seeing some talk around the printing, warehouse, the place where the discs are made, where the discs are born. They are looking to potentially, this is all secondhand hearsay, that they are potentially looking at pivoting their production to things like AI parts, which was interesting. So, look, I don't know if the warehouse will be closing, or not the warehouse, the production facility will be closing, but that's the state of the world, man. AI is everywhere, and it's certainly been responsible for the state of where Xbox is, where the state of the PlayStation price is at, and I personally have an opinion. We're about to talk about the PS6 because there was some rumours coming out, which we talked about a little bit last week. I'm not going to hammer too much, but it almost makes me wonder if they're saying. It doesn't make me wonder. I suspect the PS6 will not have a disc drive. And makes me think with more certainty that they are looking at a late 2027 release for the PS6. There was some talk today that some of the manufacturing for the console will start. I think they were planned for May 2027, which makes sense. You start making these things, you need to store them. That costs a lot of money, warehousing, etc., logistics. And so therefore you kind of want to, if you're making them in mid 2027, you kind of want to have them ready for sale probably the end of that year. So that also lines up with the rumours that have been coming out over the last week or so around the price of the PS6. We talked a little bit about last week, so I'm not going to hammer too much, but there was a leaker by the name of Kepler L2 who claimed to have leaked the original PS6 bill of materials, that is everything that's needed to make a PS6, and that the price went to about $1,000 USD, and that's before you factor in things like labour to build it, the facilities to build it, and the equipment, the logistics, and obviously the millions and millions that Sony have likely spent on research and development for this thing. So on top of that, you take Sony's comments where they've said we do not want to absorb the cost of the console at a significant loss, and so therefore we need to sell it at a price that is both competitive but also realistic. And so if you take a look at that, you take a look at where the Steam machine launched at, north of $1,000 US. The PS5 Pro in Australia is already 1,400 Australian dollars, and you would expect the PS6 to be more powerful than that. You would hope the PS6 would be more powerful than a Pro. So if that's the case, what are we looking at when it comes to a PS6? Are we looking at 1,500? Are we looking at 1,600? How far can you push it before no one's going to buy it? And is anyone going to buy a new console is the other question. Not that anyone can buy a gaming PC right now because AI has completely and utterly screwed everything. But you sort of look at this and think, okay, what is going to happen? We're talking about the prices today. What's going to happen in 12 months when, according to Xbox themselves, they're expecting their prices to double for some of their parts? I think it was memory and storage they said was going to double. So we take that into consideration. Like, what is happening? What is this thing going to cost? Is it going to cost like $2,000 Australian? Like, what are we doing? Everyone's getting squeezed. The workers are getting squeezed. The customers are getting squeezed. You don't even own a disc anymore. Like, I really am struggling to find a shred of hope here. The only shred of hope, I guess, out of all this news that's come out today is that at least we have 5 studios that are not shut at the moment. Although we do have a substantial number of jobs in the games industry that have been lost to further this. So a great time to be in games. Great time to get into games. It also makes me wonder, like, what does this mean for the next generation of gamers? Like, we've got, obviously, kids love their Minecraft, they love their Fortnite, they love their Roblox. But I think I saw a report that, like, the average gamer is only getting more and more old. And if that's the case, how are we expecting to get a new generation of gamers in when they can't even afford, or their parents are not going to spend $1,000 to $2,000 on a PlayStation or an Xbox? That's insane. I remember when I was a kid, I grew up in a relatively low-income household, and I came home for my birthday one year. I think it was 8, 9, 10, I can't remember. Came home to an Xbox 360. And I was shocked. And that cost, I mean, it was like, it was years of scrimping and saving, I'm sure, on my mother's part. But I think it was north of $1,000. And that was with all the bells and whistles, like with the 20 gig hard drive or whatever it was. And, And thankfully, that, I must say, it did not red ring for me. So I definitely won the lottery twice over with that one. But, that was insane. I remember the PS2 being like, I don't know, $300-400. Like, let's find out. PS2 launch price Australia. Let's have a quick look. I'm just curious now. Okay, so there are a few prices. When it launched, it was $750. I did not get a PS2 at launch. But the price kind of equalized a couple of years later to about, $499 to $399, then $399 to $329. So about that $300-400 range. That's what I remember buying my PS2 at. I did trade in a bunch of stuff, if I remember correctly. But even at $749, if you factor in inflation, I don't think you get to $2,000 in 26 years. Maybe you do. Should we do the maths? Let's do the maths. Inflation calculator, Australia. Let's have a quick look. I'm just curious now. This is a basket of good value, $749. Let's assume a launch PS2 here. 2026 would cost... let's have a look. Oh, sorry. It doesn't want me to put 2025 because they've not got the dates for that. $1,500. So... there you go. Okay. I've clearly underestimated the rate of inflation over the last 25 years. $1,500 for the same PS2. Granted, that was a launch model. By 2003, we were looking at $399. That would have cost $720. So, $700 is more today, in today's money. You can swallow that one a little bit easier. I guess, the interesting thing will be the Switch 2. Like, the Switch 2 is about $450, I think, something like that, Australian, which is fantastic value when you compare it to those prices. And so I wonder if Nintendo kind of takes advantage of this and their sort of lower spec console hardware and targets the next generation of gamers that way. I don't know, but it is a bit of a concern, and I feel like this is one of those things, those cans that sort of gets kicked down the road until we're left with a boom or bust kind of cycle of, well, no one's buying games, and the kids aren't buying games anymore, so you're all dying, so we got to get out of this business. I mean, granted, we may be getting out of this business anyway, the way things are going. Hopefully not. So that's kind of what's happening in games. Bit of a terrible week. I don't have a lot of good news. And I suspect the next few weeks probably will not be as chirpy either. So hold on to your seats. We'll be reporting all of it here at leveluptimes.com. Let's talk about what's coming out this week in games. It's a bit of a packed week. To start the show off with a downer, we have the Doom: The Dark Ages Revelations came out yesterday on Tuesday. Story expansion. This is the not long-awaited. I don't know if it's long-awaited, but it's certainly been expected. Sort of DLC that returns the Khan Maker, who's obviously the creator of the Argent, to the Doom franchise. This is obviously not on Game Pass. It's a DLC, so you have to buy the DLC separately. But it's if you want to play the Dark Ages, that's on Game Pass. So try it. See how you find it. I have found, as I said earlier, this is not. It did not hit me the way that Doom and Doom Eternal did. But see how you go. Have a look at it. A couple other games on Tuesday that did come out. We had Moonlight Peaks, which is a vampire farming sim. It's Steam Deck verified. It looks pretty cute. I'm not much of a sim person because I get way too much ADHD to stick with a farming sim for an extended period of time. But I'm not that kind of... There's two types of ADHD, I feel like. I feel like there's the type that can really get stuck into it, and there's the type that just I bounce off it really quickly. But it looks really cute, and I think there's some physical copies on Steam, on Switch coming out as well. And Esports Manager 2026 also out on Tuesday. It looks like it's like a management sim, but it had a pretty cute little, quirky little feature that I saw, which was simulation mode. So you build up your team, and then you can kind of give it tactics, and you get to watch this top-down, I don't know, CS-esque view of a match. And, you can sort of throw in some tactics and help your team win, on top of the management stuff, which is obviously handling contracts, getting players, managing the organization. So that seems interesting. I don't know if I'll have time to check it out, but it is out yesterday, Tuesday. Big releases we have this week around Assassin's Creed, the long-awaited remaster of Black Flag with Black Flag Resynced. This is out tomorrow, the 9th. This, Assassin's Creed, what a history. I mean, we're on 20 years, right? It was 2005, I think, was the first Assassin's Creed one, right? 2007. Okay, so we're almost at 20 years. And Black Flag was one of the greats, if you ask me. Rebuilt on the Anvil engine. This is the they've done a lot of work. So I was watching some videos by the studio around. They've redone a lot of combat, particularly obviously the ship combat, and they've done a lot of work around. It's an open world game, but they've sort of taken it that extra level. They've given it that modern Assassin's Creed kind of flair. Edward Kenway, again, sea shanties, the whole lot. It's all there. It's out tomorrow, and it'll be out on Ubisoft Plus if you're a subscription junkie. Otherwise, you can pick that up in stores tomorrow. Also out tomorrow, we have EA Sports College Football 27. I add this one in because it was one of the top-selling games in the US, I think in 2004, which surprised me. Obviously, I'm in Australia. I do not follow American football. The gridiron, I do not follow it. But that was really interesting to me. From what I understand, it's a faster-paced football game. So if you think about your Maddens, this is a little bit faster than that. And it's the first time on PC, so I thought it was a notable mention there, and that is out tomorrow as well. Echoes of Ankrad, I believe that is how you pronounce it, is out on Friday. It's a Bandai Namco JRPG. It looks pretty cool, looks pretty cute. again, it's probably what you've come to expect from a Bandai Namco JRPG, but it looks pretty neat, and that's out on Friday. And then probably more interestingly is this game called Cat Chess, which is out on Steam technically today. I'm actually checking right now because the Steam, the developer notes on the Steam page were saying we're coming out on the 8th of July. In fact, this is a direct quote from the developer. Meow meow, meow 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 meow, meow meow, mew, moo, meow, meow meow, release July 8th. So if I go to the Steam page, it then says planned release date 15th. So I'm in Australia, so I'm assuming the 8th is going to be an overnight release if it happens. But they have not updated their Steam page to reflect that, and so therefore there is a chance we will see this on the drop again next week, if it doesn't come out tonight. So keep your eyes out. But it looks, I mean, if you like chess, sure. I was going to say, if you like chess, you'll love. No, it looks like a really flavorful game of chess played with cats. It looks dumb. It looks, in the nicest possible way, it looks dumb, and I'm kind of keen. As shit as I am at chess, I am actually keen to check this one out as well. Over on the website, we have got a bit of a packed week. We're obviously checking out Black Flag Resynced tomorrow. We'll do a bit of a blind date on that, and then hoping to spend enough time to do a review. Obviously, there's a lot of games coming out, so I'll do my best. And then I kind of we're thinking of doing some kind of weekend Friday ? Show where we kind of relax, we kind of chill, maybe grab a drink, play a couple games. And some of the games I want to check out are the Model Shell 2 open beta. It just looks like a really beautiful, another Souls-esque kind of game, which I'm kind of keen on checking out. Terratech Legion, which is getting a lot of hype online. It's a what do they call them? Bullet heaven games. So your vampire survivors. I almost said vampire crawlers. That's a very different game. Vampire Survivors kind of game, but with a car. So you sort of, you've got this truck and you're driving around and you're getting kills with guns on the truck, and then you level up and you get parts that you put on the truck at your whim to sort of build the ultimate driving killing machine. It looks pretty cool, and it's getting a lot of buzz online, so keen to check that one out. And then last but not least, we've got Mecha Chameleon, which is a insane looking multiplayer game. It's a co-op hide and seek. I don't know if I would say co-op. That's what the official description says. It's a hide and seek game where if you were on the hiding team, you are literally a white canvas dude, and you run around the map and you find a spot to hide, and then you use a paintbrush, like a Microsoft Paint set of tools or Photoshop set of tools, to paint your white dude so that you match into the background and try not to get caught by the seekers. It looks like dumb fun. It looks like something I need to check out, and I'm keen to do that maybe with some friends. So we might do a stream on that one on sometime on the weekend. Obviously, this week I'm going to be playing a bit more of the Star Fox Switch 2 remake. The aim is to sort of put together a video where we sort of compare and contrast the two. It might be rough around the edges, but we spent so much time on it. I kind of want to do that. So that's also on my radar for the week. Question time. If you've got any questions, send them over to us, podcast at leveluptimes.com. That's PODCAST at LEVELUPTIMES.com. And we'll get to them. We've got, again, fresh podcasts. I'm not expecting a huge amount. I did send some questions. I did send some fillers out to my friends saying, hey, can you listen to this episode, help my view count out, and also can you send me some questions? And I did have this one, which I thought was an interesting one to talk about. Is there a game from your childhood you're scared to see remade because deep down you know it wasn't actually that good and the remake will prove it? I thought a little bit about this when this is from Casey, who sent this through. I spent a little bit of time thinking about this. And as sad as it was that it got cancelled, from Ubisoft, which was the Prince of Persia: Sands of Time remake. I'm actually glad it didn't get to see the light of day. A part of me really wants to see it, don't get me wrong. Like, if someone finds a build or someone leaks the video, I'm going to eat it up, because it's probably one of my top games, like, of all time. It's in my top 3, probably. But the more I heard about that game's development, the more worried I got. It got canned once. It went to another studio to get rebuilt again from the ground up. And then Ubisoft cut it like a month or something, if I remember correctly, before it came out. And so there's a part of me that would love to see it, but a part of me that's glad that my memory of that game, and I play it not super regularly, but I actually finished it probably a year ago. I go back to it regularly. It's one of my favorite games of all time, which is Prince of Persia: Sands of Time. That is the game that I'm glad I did not get to see remade, because I'm sure I would have been disappointed, and there's even a chance it may have tarnished my memory of that game. So that's my answer for that. One more question here. Let me find it. This is a bit of an interesting question around sort of what ownership means. And the question is, I've got a game on disc, but the servers are dead. Do I still own it, or is it just a really expensive coaster at this point? There's 2 answers to this. One is, yes, you own it. Like, even if you use it as a coaster, you are gaining value from that disc. That's one argument I would make. The second argument I would make is, I saw a post about Anthem, which was for those that don't know, was an EA-produced third-person shooter attempting to compete with Destiny, made by BioWare, and it got shut down. It released poorly. They were going to do like a version 2 that they had even said, we're going to do it. Here's some screenshots. It's going to happen. We're going to make Anthem fantastic. You're going to love it. And then EA canned the whole thing. And then and on top of that, they shut the servers down. So that game, you put it in a disk drive, and you get a main menu, and you press the button to start, and nothing happens. I saw a post about a game store, I think it was in the States, and they were selling copies of it sealed for $50, $60. Like it's like a piece of art, like. And a part of me thinks, you know what? That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard, because I'm sure I can go on eBay right now. In fact, let's do it. I'm curious. And while I do that, I can buy a copy of that game, or even Concord for that matter, for fairly cheap, I'm pretty sure. Here we go. Anthem brand new factory sealed, $11.95 for PS4. There's no reason to be selling this game at $50, $60, but there was a joke. Like, it was almost like they had forgotten that game existed on the shelves and never repriced it or never got rid of it off the shelves. And then they put it on this, I think it was like a top shelf. Like, you know how you go to some retro stores and you've got like glass cabinets with, an SNES and maybe like a first printing Mario All-Stars. I don't know. You've got those kind of key items. And I think it was in there. I think I remember seeing a photo of like a copy of Anthem sitting inside one of those glass cabinets. However way you want to cut it, I think, right, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. But on the other hand, what happens in 50 years? Like, I have this sealed, not me, but I have a sealed copy of Concord, let's assume. And that one's funny, because that one I'm actually looking up on eBay, and there's copies going for like $500. Obviously, less of a print run, was killed before it really started. That's a slightly different story. But I remember people were buying copies, like there was a joke going around when Concord shut down to say, I'm going to pick up 500 copies of it now because I'm going to make it big, baby. And sure enough, like, sealed copies of Concord. Here's a PAL Australian copy, $139. Korean ultra rare version of Concord, $476. Mint UK edition, $63, which, that's still pretty expensive. $85, pulled from shelves. So, there's a bit more value to this one. But my question is, let's say I've got a copy of Concord, Anthem, insert game here, in 2056, when we're well into the PS8, we're downloading games into our brains, spaceships are flying cars are everywhere, the Jetsons are here, and I still have this copy of Concord. There's a value to that. I suspect there will be a value. There'll always be market for collectors. I don't see why. I mean, in 50 years, how many live service games? Look at Destiny. I mean, that game's alive in the sense that the heartbeat is running. No one's actually there anymore, but the heartbeat's going. But at some point, Destiny 1 is going to have to shut down when the cost of running it outweighs the cost of having it. And likewise with Destiny 2. At some point, Destiny 2 just has to be shut down. And we can talk about game preservation and private servers. I know there was a project for a while there for Destiny 1 to try and, keep it going. But there's Oryx statues, there's collector's editions, there's ghosts that you can buy. And so what happens in 50 years when that game is dead? Maybe the discs will be worth something too. I don't know. But I do think that there is an inherent value to owning it, because you literally own the material that it is made of. Whether the game works or not is a separate question. But it has an inherent value that someone will want to pay for. Now, you may make a loss if you're trying to flip games. That's a different story. But you've still got that. You own that. In 50 years when we're buying games digitally, or, in 10 years, 5 years when we're buying games digitally, and the PlayStation store goes down because no one's buying games anymore, the kids aren't buying games anymore, so Sony's like, kill it. The whole thing shuts down. What do I actually own? I don't even own an experience. I barely own the memories. You own the memories, sure, but you don't have the physical memories. I remember the day I went to the store, the day I purchased this game. You've lost all that. And so that's why I've always been pro physical media. Even the Switch 2. I mean, the Switch 2 is an interesting story, right? Like, half of these games are key cards. They don't even have, you're buying a key, like a ownership key. It's just tied to the thing. But at the very least, in that instance, I can still sell that game and that key to someone else, and they can play it. You can't do that with a digital download. So unless they find a way to do it, I know there was talk about Xbox wanting to find a way to allow you to trade your games in, and they would then convert them into a digital copy or something, because they can read the serial number on the disc, like on the sectors of the disc that you can't modify even if you made a pirate version. Not that piracy is rampant in that regard anymore, but so who knows? But I do genuinely believe, to answer the core of that question, there is a value. You still own the disc. You still own whatever that disc does. You still own that, and there's value in that to the secondhand market, but also to yourself, right? And even if you use it as a coaster, like I said, like jokingly, but hey, you've got a coaster there. You got 50 cents right there. And some of those discs looks pretty cool. You might have a cool looking coaster. Anyway, that'll do it for the mailbox. As I said, if you've got any questions, you want to send them over to podcast@leveluptimes.com. And while you're there, why don't you sign up? Head on over to our website, www.leveluptimes.com. You can take a look at the drop, which is our weekly game releases article. And you can add them to your library, you can add them to your wish list, track your backlog. We're up to, I was adding games today for some stories, and while I'm there I try and go back and sort of add a bunch of historical games that I remember as I'm doing it, and we're up to 850 games in the database, so including DLCs, including a bunch of expansion stuff as well, but that database is always growing. Every time I think of a game, I'm like, that needs to go in the database. And so the aim is eventually, you can track all sorts of backlogs, your retro collection if you wanted to, and hopefully we'll add some features along the way. We're looking to add some more utility to the site, which is a big thing that I'm looking to do here as well. So that's about it. That's going to wrap it up for this week. If you're around, check us out tomorrow. We're going to be putting out a members-only podcast. It's a free members-only podcast on the website called Memory Dump. We'll be talking about speculation of the PS6, the physical media fallout, the fallout of all of these Xbox cuts, and so much more. That's a nice little episode for you on the website, members only, launching tomorrow. And we'll be doing that every day after the podcast. We'll put that out, and it'll be members only for a week. And then when the next podcast comes out, we'll open the last one to everyone as well. So hope you can stick around for that. As I said, check us out this week. We'll be doing a lot of gameplay for a bunch of games, but predominantly Assassin's Creed Black Flag Resynced. Super excited for it. Thanks for joining me on the Level Up Times podcast. Save early, save often. See you guys later.